It all started when Jinhyuk, a hardcore gamer with god-tier reflexes and no social life, finally beat Tower of Trials, a game so insanely difficult it felt like it was designed to be unbeatable. For 11 years, he fought through unbeatable bosses, infinite HP sponges, and a maze designed by a drunk GPS. The game died, but a few players, including Jinhyuk, never quit. And now, breathless on the 50th floor, the system finally congratulated him as the first to clear it. Later, as he started dozing off, sleep finally caught up to him. When he woke up with a throbbing head, he groaned and reached for the PC, thinking he needed to upload the video of him clearing the tower. But then something strange caught his eye. On the screen, a live stream called Tower of Trials was trending, with a massive number of viewers. His face froze in shock. That name sounded too familiar. He clicked the stream. The broadcast showed people gathering around a huge tower that had appeared right in the middle of the city. A broadcaster was explaining that this was the same tower from a game released 11 years ago, Tower of Trials. The camera panned to the sky, now blood red. Jinhyuk watched the stream in disbelief. This was the exact opening sequence of Tower of Trials. His heart skipped as a system panel suddenly opened right in front of him, confirming the tower had been rebooted and the first update was complete. The city outside darkened. A system-wide alert appeared, announcing that all players must clear every floor of the tower within 90 days. People throughout the city were staring at the same message. Failure meant the end of humanity. Jinhyuk's chair toppled as he stood up in disbelief, eyes locked onto the glowing system screen. None of this made sense. A notification confirmed the Tower of Trials had rebooted, and Jinhyuk quickly threw on his jacket, heart racing with excitement, rushed out, determined to reach a crucial item before it was too late. While others panicked, Jinhyuk headed into a subway station, one of Korea's 30 external event regions. A system message confirmed he'd entered an event area, and he calmly walked through the tense crowd, knowing only a few rare items would spawn. He was spotted by Jangsu, a popular streamer and shady company rep, who teased him and offered a new contract. Jinhyuk, recalling how Jangsu ruined lives with predatory deals, punched him in the face without hesitation. Suddenly, energy erupted from the water, and a massive tree, the mangrove of greed, emerged, bearing 4 red fruits that could boost stats. As everyone scrambled for them, Jangsu, bloodied, pleaded for cooperation. Jinhyuk shut him down, saying it wasn't time yet, then smiled. As people scrambled for the stat-boosting fruits, one man bit into one, gaining agility. Jinhyuk observed calmly, knowing most didn't realize what came next. Once all fruits were eaten, the mangrove's roots violently attacked. Panic spread and many backed off, but Jinhyuk stayed, knowing the true reward only appeared after. Jangsu, initially ready to flee, asked Jinhyuk for a plan. Jinhyuk suggested flanking the tree together. But as they moved, Jangsu betrayed him, calling Jinhyuk the bait. Smirking, Jinhyuk thought Jangsu was the real bait. The roots grabbed Jangsu, ignoring his screams as Jinhyuk dashed forward. Using the root's force, Jinhyuk exposed the tree's heart. Armed with a root fragment, he prepared to strike. The mangrove activated blood-sucking vine, its dark aura roots lashing out. Jinhyuk, unfazed, deflected the attacks, his eyes glowing blue as he closed in on the core, confident, experienced, and in control. Jinhyuk pushed forward through sweat and heat, nearly reaching his goal. Behind a tree crowned with green leaves, glowing blue butterflies emerged, sleepy butterflies. Recognizing the threat, Jinhyuk held his breath and dodged them, knowing the powder they released could knock him out. He rushed to a tall tree where a red heart pulsed in its trunk. Striking it triggered violent retaliation. Gritting his teeth, he slammed his palm into the trunk, releasing a shockwave. The tree groaned as roots rose and burnt leaves fell. A system message appeared. Jinhyuk was the first to defeat the mangrove tree of greed. As the tree split dry and pale, Jinhyuk reflected on the hours he'd spent studying its patterns. His name was now recorded in the Hall of Fame. When asked to enter a name, Jinhyuk refused, choosing to remain anonymous. The system compromised. His face would be blurred, voice altered, and name hidden. That was good enough for now. Reaching into the hollow trunk, Jinhyuk retrieved a glowing jade orb, the tree orb. Unlike the fruits that gave 3 stats points, the orb gave 12 points, equal to 4 level-ups. Grinning, he swallowed it. Light burst from his chest. Checking his stats, he was still level 1, but with 12 extra points, the strongest level 1 player alive. 1 hour later, headlines started flashing across screens, showing Jinhyuk's victory. The system announced that the video would be uploaded in 10 minutes. On YouTube, the chat exploded with comments. After the first few reactions, most of them were filled with disbelief. People were calling it pure luck or accusing him of cheating. However, once the system confirmed the video upload and the footage rolled with Jinhyuk's face blurred by a mosaic, those doubts disappeared. Even if reactions varied slightly, the overall response stayed consistent. Meanwhile, on his main account, Directors were offering him as much money as he wanted. Sitting alone in his room, staring at his phone, Jin Hyuk wondered if it was really that impressive. The mangrove tree of greed wasn't easy to defeat at level 1, but it wasn't something to be this shocked about either. He figured most people never even reached the mid to late stages of the game, so it made sense. Then the screen showed the 1 billion won offer. Jin Hyuk thought back to his own life. He had struggled to survive, often late on rent, sometimes going hungry for days just to earn enough for mukbang streams. If someone had made this offer yesterday, he would have taken it without a second thought. But now, he had no intention of selling his knowledge for 1 billion or even 10 billion won. The most valuable thing right now is information monopoly. Remembering his fight with the tree, Jin Hyuk looked down at the phone in his hand, already thinking about his next move. Ever since the game began, the leaking mana from the Tower of Trials had spread across Seoul. It hadn't caused chaos yet, but one thing changed. Tower artifacts were now appearing outside as holy relics. Just replicas, though. Fakes of the real ones hidden inside Tower. While checking his phone, Jin Hyuk noted this was the best time to collect the most replicas. He stood in front of the National Museum of Korea, a place packed with artifacts, and in his eyes, a treasure chest waiting to be opened. But he also realized he wasn't the only one aiming for it. Unlike the mangrove tree of greed, which had spawned in 7 different locations around Seoul, there was only one national museum. That meant competitors would be pouring in from every district, and among them would be former top players. He pulled open the door and stepped inside. The system announced he had entered the event area. It was quieter than expected. He wondered if no one had arrived yet, but as he looked around, he realized he was wrong. There was someone there before him. Against the wall, a burned corpse was slumped in the shadows. Jin Hyuk figured that since the world had changed, he expected others to adapt quickly too. But the gap between what he imagined and what was happening was much bigger than anyone could have predicted. People had already gotten bold, just in a single day. He thought they were probably aiming for the artifact kept in the medieval classical era gallery, the one everyone who came here was after. Jin Hyuk then pulled out the great map of the eastern lands. Of course, he wasn't interested in looking at a regular map of Korea. This one, now imbued with magical energy, contained critical info about the Tower of Trials. That's what made it so valuable. It showed where the mazes and ruins were, what monsters lived inside them, and what kind of items could be found there. Even though it only provided details up to the 10th floor, that was more than enough to fire people up. While everyone was distracted chasing after it, Jin Hyuk realized they were all going to miss the truly valuable artifacts buried under the noise, the ones hidden beneath the mud. Suddenly, something crashed. An artifact broke as a group of people fought over items, causing a commotion. Then a loud voice barked at them to freeze. People turned to see a massive man, built like a Hulk, standing tall with glowing red eyes. He warned that anyone who moved would die, but one of the other visitors wasn't impressed. He smirked, lifted a blood-stained hammer, and said if that guy even twitched a toe, he'd smash his head in. The Hulk-looking man, clearly enraged, stopped holding back. His fury intensified and his body started morphing. His hands turned into horrifying weapons, grotesque and massive. A girl nearby stepped back, clearly terrified. Even the mocking guy started to realize this was way beyond what he expected. The big guy released a strange, violent aura around him, declaring that the map belonged to him. But before he could go any further, an old man in the back let out a dry laugh. He said he couldn't agree with that, and his words only pushed the Hulk deeper into rage. The old man introduced himself as Youngwoo, but the Hulk wasn't interested in names. He told the geezer he'd twist that crusty neck of his like a chicken. But the old man just sighed, snapped his fingers, and asked which would happen faster, getting his neck snapped or turning the other guy into charcoal. A flickering flame sparked to life over his finger, then exploded into a massive fireball. He hurled it straight at the Hulk, who let out a scream as his entire body went up in flames. The old man didn't even glance back. He just muttered that it was his tongue that brought him misfortune. As he turned away, a girl appeared behind him and complimented his magic. She looked pleased to join him. He called her Yuri and told her he'd leave his back to her. She nodded, then walked over to a small statue and placed her hand on it, saying she only needed this one. Yuri's eyes lit up with a strange aura as it swirled around the statue. She warned that if anyone got in the way, she would handle them. The small statue transformed into a towering monster holding a long spear. Yuri stood beside it calmly, saying anyone who moved from now on would be seen as an enemy. She said the monster would make a meal out of their heads. The monster raised its weapon while Yuri smiled, asking everyone to cooperate. Panic settled in. People looked around, realizing how outmatched they were. Someone mumbled how it was insane that these people had already awakened. Weapons dropped to the floor. A group of them gave up entirely, saying they didn't want the map or anything else. They could take it all. Yuri gave a polite smile and thanked them, but then she suddenly paused. Jin Hyuk stepped forward, calmly picking up a scattered page from the floor. He commented that she'd made a mess of the place. As he brushed off the dirt and checked the page for damage, he muttered that at least it wasn't torn. If the others didn't care about the country's history, he might as well clean up after them. Yuri stared at him, her glowing eyes filled with confusion and horror. She called him fearless, wondering aloud if he thought she was joking. Then, anger flashing across her face, she commanded her monster to attack. The giant beast roared and charged forward, gripping its long spear. Jin Hyuk stood still, watching it come straight at him. As the spear blade approached Jin Hyuk, he simply waved his hand, causing the weapon to drop to the floor. Yuri looked shocked, and behind Jin Hyuk, a deep crack had formed in the ground. The others stood in disbelief, unable to understand how he had done that. Jin Hyuk figured they were all clueless about his stats, which explained their surprise. He then asked Yuri what she planned to do now that her puppet's weapon was out of play. Yuri calmly reached into her bag and replied that she had other statues. As she pulled them out, a strange mana began to surge around them. The statues hovered in the air, and the system announced that the artifact, the avatar of Anubis replica, was coming to life. Jin Hyuk raised an eyebrow while the dark-faced girl focused her energy and stood behind the floating statues, which had grown in size. She then asked him if he still wanted to keep smiling. Jin Hyuk chuckled, impressed that she could control 5 statues at once with such a limited mana pool. He thought she wasn't an ordinary player, much like the magic user he had encountered earlier. It became clear to him that there were quite a few players who had moved beyond the newbie stage. Jin Hyuk decided to tease her by acting like he was measuring her level, which annoyed her. She snapped that she didn't like him. Jin Hyuk, squinting, figured it was time to show her what a real gap in levels looked like. He took out an old paper, thinking that if the difference in power was too big, she wouldn't even be able to understand it. He tossed it away and decided to let her witness the difference with her own eyes. As he extended his hand, energy crackled around it, and the system declared that mana had been injected into the Pinewood Tiger replica. With a burst of energy, the system then announced the appearance of the ruler of the mountains, and a massive tiger formed from mana, roaring as it emerged. The girl stood frozen, her statue monsters glaring furiously with glowing red eyes. Jin Hyuk mocked that a mere jackal was daring to bare its teeth at the ruler of the mountains. He pointed his finger forward and ordered the tiger to devour them. The beast charged, fighting fiercely and tearing through each statue. The girl broke into a sweat, stunned. She had heard of many ways to use artifacts, but had never seen anything like this. As the tiger approached her, she felt the overwhelming force, like her skin was about to rip apart. The sheer pressure and bright light forced her to her knees. She had believed she played her strongest hand, but realized now she couldn't win. As the darkness lifted, she found Jin Hyuk standing before her. He demanded she hand it over. Confused, she asked what he meant, and Jin Hyuk told her to give him the mask of Tutankhamun. The girl gritted her teeth and said the mask was useless in Korea, wondering what he even needed it for. Jin Hyuk gave another subtle threat, hinting toward the tiger, and she finally screamed that she'd hand it over. The system notified that Jin Hyuk had obtained the artifact, the mask of Tutankhamun replica. Holding the mask, he felt satisfied, having secured his second artifact. The girl then asked if he was after the great map of the East Lands. Jin Hyuk paused, realizing he'd forgotten about that, and casually told Yuri not to worry about it. He instructed the tiger to stay behind and guard so no one could follow. The others backed away, clearly intimidated by the presence of the massive beast. Seeing everything fall into place, Jin Hyuk grinned with determination. The preparations were complete. He turned toward the stairs, ready to go after the strongest prey in the Tower of Trials. As Jin Hyuk reached the upper floors, he entered a dark room where ancient artifacts were sealed behind glass. The old man Youngwoo stood there in disbelief, wondering how Yuri had let everything slip like this. He was surprised to see Jin Hyuk beside him and couldn't believe he'd made it up there. It puzzled him how Jin Hyuk had gotten past Yuri. In front of them was a glowing doorway. Jin Hyuk spoke up, guessing it was a 1-star rank barrier. Youngwoo replied, slightly impressed, realizing Jin Hyuk knew what he was talking about. He extended his hand toward the barrier, admitting he'd never seen anything like it. Jin Hyuk did the same and closed his eyes, sensing the flow of mana and finding the point where it diverged. A black fog swirled around him, then a light shimmered, and strange text appeared. Jin Hyuk pronounced the word Karpo. He turned to the old man, saying he thought there was a way to destroy it, but there was a condition. Youngwoo looked doubtful. Jin Hyuk told him he needed to keep using his flame magic continuously to weaken the barrier while he went inside and came back out with the necessary relics. The old man smirked, understanding what Jin Hyuk wanted. Jin Hyuk admitted he couldn't hold magic strong enough to weaken the barrier for long. He added that Youngwoo might not trust him, but it was the only way. Morning would come soon, and they couldn't leave without anything. He told the old man he could keep the map since Jin-hyuk was after something else. Youngwoo thought to himself that gaining nothing after all this effort would be the worst outcome. He asked Jin-hyuk if he meant to hand over the map. Jin-hyuk confirmed it. He didn't want to make an enemy out of a high-ranking magic user anyway. The old man scoffed, realizing he had no choice but to trust Jin-hyuk, and agreed. Jin-hyuk walked toward the barrier and told the old man he'd be in his care. Youngwoo, already channeling flames, replied that he'd try his best. A massive stream of fire surged toward the barrier as Jin-hyuk leapt through and landed on the other side. He repeated the word Karpo while Youngwoo shouted at him to hurry. Jin-hyuk replied with a grin, thinking he planned to do this in his way. Inside, the room was filled with ancient relics covered in glass. Jin-hyuk noticed it looked untouched, unlike the lower floors. Except for one broken display case, everything seemed untouched. The system alerted him about an iron sword inscribed with Kyanlong. Jin-hyuk figured someone had already been here, taken what they needed, and set the barrier before leaving. He assumed that person didn't care about the chaos downstairs and just wanted to avoid unnecessary risks. As Jin-hyuk examined a different case, he counted something, then smiled. He had found what he was looking for. The relic that had been taken was just a second-rate one. In another case, he spotted a bunch of gold coins. The system identified them as coins from the Joseon dynasty. Jin-hyuk picked them up, thinking about the materials he needed for his inherent ability, the last puzzle piece. He recalled needing ceremonial Persian framework and the right eye of Tutankhamun's mask. As he combined the two relics, a glowing mana light formed in front of him. The system notified that the relics were reacting. Jin-hyuk recognized this message. It only appeared when compatible relics met. As he pulled the thread holding the coins, the system told him to pay the appropriate price to continue. Jin-hyuk waved his hand, and coins began to rain down. He shielded his face from the golden stream's pressure while the system declared that the relics were reacting with each other. Another notification confirmed he had successfully combined the relics against all odds. Jin-hyuk smiled as the system announced he had received the Eye of Truth. A golden glow surrounded a black eye, and the system panel displayed its details. He could now view others, status windows, and detect lies or truth up to 3 times a day. Staring at the glow on his palm, Jin-hyuk realized the Eye of Truth was the greatest among the 5 legendary eyes. But he had another reason for coming to the museum. The system revealed a hidden quest completion. By combining 3 B-rank or lower replica relics to craft an item of S-rank or higher, Jin-hyuk had fulfilled the requirement. Blue energy swirled around his legs as he closed his eyes, visualizing white squares. He thought about copying and storing the many abilities in this world, then fusing them to create even stronger ones. That would be his weapon to become the strongest in the Tower of Trials. The system announced he had gained the inherent ability fusion. A memory of the world was being created. It explained that by completing certain quests, Jin-hyuk could copy and store others' inherent skills within the memory of the world, then fuse those to produce higher dimensional abilities. Jin-hyuk understood, but there was a warning. If the difficulty of copying a skill increased, the condition for copying might change. Meanwhile, outside the barrier, Youngwoo was drenched in sweat, still maintaining his flame magic. He called out, asking if Jin-hyuk was done. Jin-hyuk, hearing him, thought to himself that to copy the old man's ability, he had to meet the condition. The system showed it. Youngwoo had always hidden his true feelings behind a mask. To copy the skill, Jin-hyuk had to make him reveal what he felt. Jin-hyuk grinned, realizing all he needed to do now was piss the old man off. As the old man struggled to keep his magic going, he called out to Jin-hyuk again, telling him to hurry. Jin-hyuk, relaxed, told him to stop using his skill. Youngwoo, already furious and drained, didn't get what Jin-hyuk meant. Jin-hyuk calmly explained that there had been no reason for him to keep using magic in the first place. The old man, stunned, demanded to know why Jin-hyuk made him do it then. Jin-hyuk replied with a single word, Karpo, and thought back on how easy it was to break the barrier as long as someone said the right Latin word. The truth was, Youngwoo hadn't helped at all. Jin-hyuk realized there was no point in wasting magic on something that couldn't even be pierced. That only left Youngwoo's magic at rock bottom. With that confirmed, Jin-hyuk moved to the next step, getting under the old man's skin. Standing in front of the map, Jin-hyuk already knew every detail about the tower up to the 10th floor. That made the map completely useless to him. Holding a lighter in his hand and wearing a smug grin, he had no intention of handing it over easily. The old man shouted, demanding to know what Jin-hyuk was doing. But Jin-hyuk, face darkening, lit the lighter right beneath the map and said he didn't need it. Flames spread across the map. He thought that if someone else got access to the knowledge hidden in it, they could gain an edge over him. The only way to remove that threat was to erase the possibility. Jungwoo screamed in rage, watching the map go up in flames. He began cursing Jinhyuk, while Jinhyuk's eyes glowed as the system notified him that the condition had been met. Another alert followed, confirming he had successfully copied the fire element skill. The system stated that the copied skill was now saved in the world's memory and that Jinhyuk's fire affinity would increase. Jinhyuk grinned, thinking it wasn't a bad start for his first copy. Jungwoo, still seething, shouted that Jinhyuk would pay for it. Jinhyuk responded, saying the old man clearly didn't understand why the map had to burn. At that moment, the system announced the fire element had been activated. Flames burst from both of Jinhyuk's hands. The old man, holding a single flame, was stunned. Jungwoo watched the fire in Jinhyuk's hands and realized it was the same skill, but the power behind Jinhyuk's version far exceeded his own. He could tell Jinhyuk wasn't normal. Maybe he didn't even need the map to begin with. He asked who Jinhyuk was. Jinhyuk told him that if he wanted to climb the tower, then he should listen. There had been 4 veterans who showed up at the National Museum of Korea, including himself. He understood they all wanted to lower their risks, especially now that the world had become the Tower of Trials. But at the same time, they were racing to get ahead. He said he needed to gather as many skills and innate abilities as possible. Before leaving, he told the old man that he'd be in touch. In the meantime, he wanted him and the girl downstairs to level up. He had acquired a few good pieces, but there was still a long road ahead. Skills were the priority now. As Jinhyuk walked away, he thought about how he only had one body. It'd be impossible to get every skill, so the most valuable and powerful ones were the ones worth hoarding. Then, as his stomach growled, he headed to a nearby gukbap shop. Inside, people were fixated on the news channel. A man on screen was reporting that there had been at least 23 deaths and over 50 injuries at the National Museum. He said it looked like the leaders were targeting the relics and that similar events were happening in other countries. Jinhyuk sat at a table, watching the footage of himself battling statue monsters and summoning the tiger. The man on the news confirmed the footage was real, even though it was hard to believe. People were stunned. Some whispered that he looked like the guy from the mangrove incident. Jinhyuk realized that people might start recognizing him. He needed to hide his identity. The reporter continued, announcing that the government had launched an investigation into the Tower of Trials and had already formed a special unit called the Awakened Association. It would be staffed with veterans possessing various abilities. Jinhyuk was surprised at how fast the government responded. He thought it would take at least a few weeks, but they were already adapting. He didn't expect them to move this quickly. Then the news shifted. On screen, a man introduced himself as Sangjin, the chief of the new Awakened Association. He said the reason he was speaking publicly was to recruit more awakened individuals. Depending on their rank, they would receive an annual salary of at least 60 million won and a good position. Jinhyuk listened closely as Sangjin added that this offer excluded the person in the footage. But for those who joined, the government would provide full support for whatever they desired. While listening to Sangjin's announcement, the crowd around Jinhyuk was filled with envy and jealousy. They all knew that kind of opportunity could change a person's entire life. But Jinhyuk saw through it. In the end, he was the real target, and they were treating him like some kind of tool. No matter what they offered, he was determined not to join them. In a world like this, a single well-trained individual held more value than 100 average ones. Sangjin understood that too. That's why he offered what was essentially a blank check to win Jinhyuk over. Jinhyuk figured if Sangjin had been chosen as the association's leader, it had to be either because he had real skills or because he held the most experience inside the Tower of Trials. Either way, Jinhyuk hoped the guy had an interesting skill. It'd make copying it way more fun. Glancing at the wall clock, Jinhyuk remembered the tower was set to open at 7 tonight. Right on cue, the system announced that the Tower of Trials had officially opened. As Jinhyuk entered through the portal, he saw a large crowd gathered in front, chatting and buzzing with nervous energy. Most of them looked like newbies. As a celebration bonus, the system granted each player 100 coins, the currency used inside the tower. Then the system explained how players could earn coins by uploading videos that recorded their accomplishments. Every 10,000 views would bring in more coins, but there would be a premium charge depending on the player's rank. View counts would only matter for the first 10,000 views from within the tower, so players were advised to choose carefully before watching any content. The live broadcast feature could only be used during boss fights that advanced players to the next floor. Any form of cheating or view manipulation would be punished. Jinhyuk listened closely, thinking this whole setup was a bridge between those climbing the tower and those still living outside it. Viewers would naturally gravitate toward players with higher chances of reaching the top, which would boost their coin earnings. Of all the functions inside the tower, this one seemed the most fascinating. The more popular someone was, the more coins they could rake in. A few players rushed toward the Goblin Cave, talking excitedly about how easy farming would be there. Jin-hyuk figured they were aiming to clear it quickly and get ahead of the rest. For him, though earning coins wasn't a problem, he already knew everything about the place. But he had no interest in uploading videos. Sharing what he knew just to earn coins wasn't worth the loss. He already had something different in mind, something others wouldn't even think of. As he thought back, he remembered a time when he and his group were clearing the lower 30 levels of the tower. They had hit a dead end and couldn't move forward. The only way to advance was by finding hidden pieces buried within the earlier levels, which meant retracing their steps. Eventually, they found the answer inside an abandoned ruin. That's when Jin-hyuk realized something brutal. His character had been flawed from the very beginning. After spending years growing that character, to find out it was useless was a crushing blow. The system had popped up back then, asking if he wanted to delete his character. Jin-hyuk had sat there sweating and frustrated, wondering how this could be the outcome after all he had sacrificed. Even the time spent regretting it felt wasted. But in the end, he clicked yes. Strange energy surged around him as the deletion began. He promised himself he'd reach the top next time. Snapping back from the memory, Jin-hyuk thought about how that had already happened 6 years ago. Now he stood in front of a massive gate, as the system declared the name of the place, Labyrinthos. It was a maze in Crete, designed by Daedalus, filled with complex mazes and countless traps meant to keep people out. Jin-hyuk stood there, knowing the key to getting past the 30th floor was all about building the right foundation. That foundation, he believed, was hidden somewhere in this maze. Even though it annoyed him to go through all this again, there was something nostalgic about it. He reached out and pushed open the door. Inside, the walls were covered in murals of ancient Greeks, and everything down to the scent in the air felt the same as before. White butterflies floated beneath the ceiling. One landed on his finger, and he smiled at the familiar glow of the luminescent moth. Then he looked back and noticed a group of people had followed him. A girl greeted him with a smile, saying they were looking for a farming spot but decided to enter the labyrinth before it closed. 10 minutes before Jin-hyuk had arrived, that group had seen him open the gate without a key. Curious and a little reckless, they decided to follow him in, even though they had no idea how dangerous the place might be. The girl had reminded them that the early stages of the tower were the most crucial. If someone at level 1 could enter this place alone, then maybe it wasn't that hard. Still, some of them wondered whether Jin-hyuk would share any of the items inside. The girl, with a twisted smile, had made it clear that he wouldn't. All they had to do, she said, was make sure Jin-hyuk got a permanent rest inside the labyrinth. While the girl suggested they should work together to clear the labyrinth and share the risks, Jin-hyuk silently activated the Eye of Truth to check if she was trying to fool him. She introduced herself as Hana and said she had reached the 2nd floor of the tower before. Her status panel popped up, and Jin-hyuk immediately spotted an interesting skill, Commune. It allowed her to naturally become friendly with anyone, even strangers. The skill erased feelings of discomfort, making people more receptive without even realizing it. The system showed Jin-hyuk the copy conditions. He needed to cooperate with Hana for at least 240 hours, and at the end of that time, they had to be alone together. Jin-hyuk thought of the demonic lady and figured the skill would be useful when dealing with her later. Hana and her little squad started introducing themselves one by one like it was some team-building icebreaker. Jin-hyuk, not wanting to ruin the vibe too early, dropped a name too. But as he glanced over them, he thought there was no point in remembering anything. It was obvious they de-stab him in the back when given the chance. Then Hana, the social butterfly, slid up next to him, casually asking how far Jin-hyuk had gotten in the game. His system notified him that she had activated Commune. Watching how she was trying to create a bond, manipulate the vibes, maybe even get him to lower his guard. And she was smooth with it too. Instead, he pulled her away and replied coldly that he had gone as far as he could. Hana was confused. The skill should have worked, but it wasn't taking effect on him. She kept trying, laughing it off and asking what kind of monsters were in the labyrinth. Jin-hyuk replied that giving that much info was no big deal. As he spoke, the view around them began to shift. He explained that this labyrinth changed at set intervals. The others started to panic as the floor beneath them began to shake. Hana, confused, asked why this was happening. Wasn't it just supposed to be a first-floor labyrinth? Then the stones began falling from above. One huge stone crashed through the floor. The group hit the ground, struggling to breathe as everything finally came to a stop. It was only after a moment that they realized one girl from the group had gone missing. Still catching their breath, the rest of them looked around, shaken by what just happened. Jinhyuk stood calmly and asked if they hadn't experienced terrain-shifting labyrinths before. Hana replied that this place was too dangerous for level 1 players and insisted they needed to get out. She asked another girl in the group, Hyamin, to find an exit using her skill, but Hyamin said the labyrinth shift had canceled the skill's activation. That's when Hana realized they were trapped. She looked scared. Jinhyuk observed them quietly, thinking he finally understood why they had entered the labyrinth with such confidence. They were just relying on one simple navigation skill. These newbies must have thought this labyrinth was no more dangerous than a corner store. Idiots. Either way, what he had been waiting for should be showing up soon. Then Hana shouted at him, furious that he hadn't warned them about the shifting labyrinth. She blamed him for almost getting them finished off. The others backed her up, accusing him of hoarding all the information. One of the girls was still missing, and they believed Jinhyuk was responsible. But Jinhyuk coldly asked if he had ever once told them to follow him. His expression darkened as he reminded them they had chosen to come in here on their own. No one dragged them into this. One of the guys exploded in anger, cursing Jinhyuk and yelling like he'd hired him just to get insulted. At that moment, an axe came flying and slammed into the wall behind the guy. He collapsed to the ground, blood gushing from a fresh wound. Panic broke out among the others. A loud hoof slammed into the ground as a giant minotaur appeared, mouth wide open, roaring. The group froze in fear. Weapons appeared in their hands as the bloody axe that had been stuck in the wall suddenly vanished. The minotaur picked up the axe and charged toward them. Hana panicked, thinking they were all dead. But then Jinhyuk shouted for them to move and rush straight at the monster. Just as the minotaur swung its weapon, Jinhyuk dodged and got right above its head. The system notified him that he had successfully avoided the attack. Jinhyuk smiled. The wound on his shoulder didn't matter. Another notification popped up. He had gained the hidden stat gap. Gap was a stat that narrowed the difference in strength when fighting someone stronger, but widened it when facing someone weaker. Jinhyuk thought about how the gap narrowed by 1 level for every 3 stat points when fighting tougher enemies. As the minotaur clenched its teeth in frustration after noticing him, Jinhyuk landed on the floor and realized this was exactly how he could grow stronger even while stuck at level 1. The minotaur's eyes lit up with rage, while Jinhyuk smiled, satisfied. This method was something he had discovered only after countless trials and failures. As the monster lifted its axe, Jinhyuk easily dodged, thinking to himself that he had already received this bastard's attacks thousands, no, tens of thousands of times before. The system notified that his stat gap had increased by 0.05. His body had memorized every pattern thanks to years of envisioning and training. As identical notifications popped up again, Jinhyuk dodged another axe swing and thought that no matter how powerful the enemy, it meant nothing if the attack never landed. The group in the back watched in shock. One of them muttered that they had thought about messing with this guy. Hana stood frozen, horrified, realizing how insane it was that they were planning to end this monster and steal Jinhyuk's loot. Meanwhile, the minotaur kept swinging its axe as Jinhyuk effortlessly avoided each blow. He thought that getting stronger quickly was simple. Just bet your life on it. The greater the risk, the greater the reward. The system notified him that he had barely evaded a fatal attack, and his stat gap increased by 1. Jinhyuk looked at the notification and thought gaining 1 full stat point in exchange for a little blood wasn't a bad deal. Glancing at the blood on his fingers, he dodged again, thinking that a single misstep would make things risky. It was probably time to wrap this up. He looked back at the group and wondered if the extras were trying to run away. Hana, still panicking, searched for an exit while another girl clung to her in fear. Jinhyuk walked toward them and asked where they thought they were going. His presence only made Hana more scared. He pointed to the raging minotaur behind him and told them they should try it too, since sharing the good stuff was only fair. The minotaur swung again, and Hana jumped back in terror along with the others, who were already crying. A shockwave so strong it looked like the air itself rage quit. Debris flew, the walls cracked. Jinhyuk stared at their broken formation. Everyone folded like cheap lawn chairs. He smiled and said they should have ducked or at least created some distance. Looking at the minotaur, he asked if it agreed. Just then, a strange sound echoed through the labyrinth, and a stone wall suddenly emerged beside the minotaur, blocking its path. The wall rebuilt itself quickly, sealing the beast behind it. Jinhyuk gave a lazy wave goodbye. The minotaur, now trapped, roared in pure rage and slammed its axe down, shaking the entire maze with its cry. Hana stood there catching her breath, stunned that they got away. Jinhyuk casually explained the minotaur had been attracted to the residue left behind by the noctilucent moths he touched earlier, so it would probably keep coming after them. Hana, still shaken, asked why Jinhyuk would do something that reckless. Jinhyuk replied it was all for boosting his stats. He picked up his weapon and told them they could rest during the brief pauses when the maze shifted. That was also when the little calf would come knocking again, so it was an efficient setup. Hana nervously asked how long they had to keep this up. Jinhyuk calmly announced that they'd be in the maze for exactly 1 month. One of the guys, already terrified, panicked even more at the thought of 30 days in that hellhole. They declared they would go their own way, blaming Jinhyuk for provoking the Minotaur. Jinhyuk admitted it might be true and casually asked which direction they planned to wander off in. As they started to walk, Jinhyuk warned them that it would be even more dangerous if they moved around without a clue. Both of them froze and turned, asking if Jinhyuk knew where the exit was. Jinhyuk replied coolly that he knew this maze better than anyone else. So of course he knew where the exit was. Hana quickly realized they couldn't make it alone. She sighed and said they had no choice but to follow him. Jinhyuk gave a creepy smile. He said nothing in the world came free. Even buses had fares. Then he pointed his blade right at Hana's face and told her to cough up all her coins. The scene shifted to a man rushing forward with a shield and sword. The goblins jumped back in fear, and one powerful blow from his shield sent them flying. A guy with a bandana struck one of them down with his sword. The video of their battle paused, revealing tons of comments and over 1 million views. The bandana guy celebrated, saying it worked. His squad cheered with him. One of the guys in front of the laptop announced they'd easily make 1,000 coins just from the traffic alone. The bandana guy thanked his team, appreciating how well they'd pulled it off. Someone pointed out that everyone thought he did it alone. The video had been edited cleverly, and their support had gone unnoticed. The guy with glasses added that no one would even know he was being buffed the whole time. Then one of them noticed a nasty comment. The bandana guy sighed, muttering that the world was full of haters. Suddenly, a system window popped up, announcing a new video in the Hall of Fame. Their video ranking dropped instantly. One of the guys rushed to the screen in panic, yelling about what was going on. The title on the screen read the world's first item successfully refined. He stood there in disbelief, unable to process how that could have happened. 10 minutes earlier, Jinhyuk had gathered everyone, telling them not to stand around like idiots. He ordered them to gather moss for bedding and collect firewood for the fire. They agreed, and Jinhyuk figured it was time for him to start as well. He opened the system and checked into the coin stock exchange, deciding to secure his coins first. He clicked a few things, and the system displayed a list: enchanted tarot cards, an old worn-out bronze key fragment, a piece of a wooden wagon wheel, and a lottery refinement scroll. Jinhyuk smirked. These were the kind of junk items nobody else would ever buy. When the system asked if he wanted to purchase, he confirmed without hesitation. After completing the purchase, he focused on what mattered, how to use them. He combined 3 of the items, and a surge of blue energy lit up around him. The system confirmed the combination was successful. A new item appeared, the Wheel of Fortune. The system explained it would max out his luck stat for 10 minutes. However, the effect had limited range due to its incomplete state. Jinhyuk grinned. He had done it. Luck was one of those stats no one understood unless they knew exactly where its limits were. But Jinhyuk remembered everything from his past life. Holding the glowing wheel, the system notified that his fortune stat had reached its peak. Scrolls began raining down, each one a refinement scroll with a success rate so bad no one bothered with them. But with his luck maxed out, that rate had become a guaranteed 100%. He decided to use all the scrolls on his dagger. Notification after notification popped up, refinement successful. The system then announced that he had become the first to create a +10 refined item on the Korean server, rewarding him with 5,000 coins. Another notification followed, stating his achievement would be recorded in the Hall of Fame for the next day. Jinhyuk swung the dagger a few times, strange mana rising from its blade. He finally had something worth using. Day 10 in Dungeon Hell. Hana and the other guy sat in front of a fire they'd scraped together like cavemen on minimum wage. Their beds were made of moss, and their meals with a side of depression and mushroom misery. Hana pulled a face in disgust as she watched the guy chew on moss. She glanced over at Jinhyuk, who was lying by the fire like he was on a luxury camping trip. She was sick of it all, the Minotaur that kept showing up, the shifting labyrinth where life and death were blurred, and that one punk who treated everything like a game. The girl beside her whispered that if things kept going like this, they were going to die. The guy agreed, muttering that the demon would abandon them once he was done using them. Just then, chat messages started appearing in front of Hana. She read them, eyes wide in panic. People were asking for information on Jinhyuk. More messages popped up, and she clutched her head, frustrated she had even tried getting help from idiots outside the tower. She wondered if they could contact a guild leader for help. One of the replies said the guild was already investigating, but it would take at least 3 more weeks to reach them. That made her panic even more. 3 more weeks in this hellhole felt unbearable. When the guy asked her what was going on, she just said it was nothing. Her eyes landed on the sleeping Jinhyuk. She said she was wondering if they could just end him and hide out in the same chamber until the guild leader arrived. That way they might make it out alive. The guy beside her picked up a nearby stone, nodding. He said now was their best shot. He was asleep, and everyone dies if their head gets bashed in any way. He raised the rock, ready to strike, while Jinhyuk lay asleep, unaware of what was coming. Girl grabbed his hand just before he could throw the rock, telling him to wait. Jinhyuk's reaction speed was insane. There was no way they could beat him in a direct fight. Whether they tried sneaking up or attacking head-on, he'd probably wake the moment they made a move and counter right away. The guy asked what the plan was then, saying they couldn't just keep suffering like this. The girl reached into her bag, saying the head guild member had given her something for emergencies. She opened her palm, revealing a lethal poison. Just one drop could melt through 100 trolls. It was the stinger of a giant zucchini wasp. If they were going to do it, she said, they should make sure Jinhyuk was gone for good, and do it in a way that wouldn't put them in danger. Later, Jinhyuk looked at the tray of food in his hands and sighed in disappointment, thinking it felt like they were filming a survival show. Hana shot back, asking what he expected, then told him if he didn't like it, he could go hunt rats and moths himself. Jinhyuk thought to himself how picky she sounded. Then he ordered them like a final boss, Hana for some water, and told the other guy to bring more mushrooms. They both obeyed. When the guy handed him the mushrooms, he mumbled he couldn't believe this dude wanted more of that moldy trash. The girl, furious, watched Jinhyuk eat like he owned the place. Meanwhile, chat messages rolled in from viewers secretly watching, curious if Jinhyuk would eat the poisoned food. They both watched anxiously, smiling to themselves as Jinhyuk began eating. Then the tray hits the floor with the plot twist. It wasn't Jinhyuk. The girl looked over. It was the mushroom boy, now violently coughing up black goo like he drank expired ink. In the next moment, he collapsed, clutching his throat. Hana lost it, panicking as the guy turned into a cautionary tale on the dungeon floor. Jinhyuk calmly told them they were too dumb if they thought he'd eat what they handed over. The girls stared in shock, asking how he knew it was poisoned. Jinhyuk said when they both turned around to get more food, he'd switched the trays. He opened the system menu and said they should have known secret broadcasting counted as cheating. The girl shouted back, demanding proof. But the chat was still live, and viewers were watching as he exposed everything. Jinhyuk read through the system rules. Live broadcasts were only allowed during boss fights that blocked the path to the next floor. Any manipulation of views or misconduct would be punished. The system asked if he wanted to proceed with the report. Jinhyuk looked at Hana and said her expression had made it too obvious she was streaming. He sounded disappointed, not believing she'd do that. He confirmed the report. A warning notification surrounded Hana in glowing light. She froze in fear as the system declared her capture was complete, her anonymity removed. The live broadcast screen behind her faded out. Hana stood stunned, wondering how this was happening. More notifications appeared, viewers had left the chat, and now the viewer count was 0. Prior viewers wouldn't be able to see the video for a month, and if caught again, they'd be permanently banned. Hana panicked, asking where everyone went. The system calmly declared that the player involved would now face a harsh penalty. Hana turned around and saw the Minotaur approaching. Its roar echoed through the chamber. Terrified, she ran behind Jinhyuk and begged him to fight it, yelling that it was getting closer. Jinhyuk turned to her and called her shameless. After trying to poison him, why should he help now? She said it was because he always helped before. At that moment, the system announced that Jinhyuk had met the copy condition with Hana and successfully copied her skill commune. Jinhyuk told her he didn't need her anymore. Hana shouted back that he'd regret this, warning him that her guild's top member was from Raven. But just then, the Minotaur's attack landed, launching Hana high into the air. Jinhyuk moved away as she crashed down, muttering she'd better have good luck from here on. He wondered which she should be more afraid of, her precious guild or him. Jinhyuk drew his dagger. Mana began to glow around it. He slashed at the Minotaur with a powerful strike. It wasn't deep, but it still did some damage, enough to start closing the gap. Jinhyuk figured he wouldn't be able to finish it yet, so instead, he just needed to keep dragging it into bad situations like this. The Minotaur swung its axe. Jinhyuk responded by casting fire magic, flames engulfing the creature. He followed up with a strike to its leg, causing it to kneel. He told it not to go crazy just because it had a ripped body. The meat would probably be too tough to chew anyway. Holding his dagger tight, he waited for what was next. Just then, the Minotaur's eyes lit up. The system declared that the Guardian of the Labyrinth had activated its berserk state. The Minotaur extended its hand, mouth opening wide. The Minotaur's hooves slammed into the floor, breaking it into fragments as green energy surged from its horns and axe. Jinhyuk stood confidently, holding his dagger up. Hana, watching in fear, wondered how they were supposed to win against something like that. The Minotaur entered a full rage, and the frenzy icon appeared. The system declared the skill's effects. Attack power, attack speed, and sword speed would all increase by 30% for 5 minutes. On top of that, the Minotaur's intelligence was temporarily boosted, allowing it to speak human language. It roared at Jinhyuk, vowing to tear him apart and scatter his remains across the dungeon so he'd never return. Jinhyuk, feeling his mana flow more efficiently than before, told the Minotaur to bring it on. The beast charged in, swinging its axe with terrifying force, but Jinhyuk deflected the blow with his dagger. He blocked each attack one by one, not dodging anymore. Hana, watching from the sidelines, was shocked. She realized Jinhyuk was letting his power loose. Even a boss monster using a level 10 skill wouldn't stand a chance against him. Not even the entire Crow Guild combined could pull off what he was doing. And still, Jinhyuk kept smiling. To Jinhyuk, time felt like it stopped. He thought about how frustrating it was that no matter how far he ran, he always felt like he was back at square one, like nothing ever changed. Then the system gave a death notice, reminding him that whether in reality or the game, everything was hellishly hard. But another notification followed, stating his gap stat had increased by 57. Memories of the battle flashed through Jinhyuk's mind, and he realized this world responded directly to him. With each deflected axe strike, his gap stat continued to climb. His dagger held up well, avoiding direct hits, while the Minotaur's axe tore holes through the stone floor. Seeing an opening, Jinhyuk struck the Minotaur with his dagger, covering the creature's body in wounds. The Minotaur sneered, claiming Jinhyuk was only pretending to be strong and could barely scratch him. It raised its fist, and a bright flash erupted in front of Jinhyuk. A shockwave swept across the chamber, but Jinhyuk managed to land on a raised stone. The Minotaur's fist stopped right in front of his face. Just then, the system announced the end of the Minotaur's explosion state. Jinhyuk looked at the immobilized monster and reminded it that its 5 minutes were up. The Minotaur clenched its teeth in frustration. That berserk skill had unleashed extreme power, but now it came with a 24-hour penalty. The system confirmed the suspension, and the Minotaur collapsed to the ground. Jinhyuk checked his stat window. He now had 57 gap stat points. That meant he had closed a gap of 19 levels. With 20 days left, he figured that was enough to reach his goal of 100 points. Hana stepped forward, asking if the fight was over. Jinhyuk said it was only paused. The Minotaur would come after them again if they switched labyrinths and waited a day. He reminded her that 20 days remained. 20 days later, the labyrinth's stone floor lay in ruins. The Minotaur raised its axe over Jinhyuk, who easily dodged the attack. The system declared Jinhyuk's gap stat had finally reached 100, his target. The Minotaur charged, growling, but Jinhyuk slammed his fist into its chin, weakening it instantly. Jinhyuk pinned the beast's horns to the ground with his foot and said it was time for goodbye. Smiling, he turned toward Hana, the only thing left to deal with. Hana stood frozen in fear. Jinhyuk announced that he was now recruiting interns for the Goen Company and asked if she was interested. She shouted that she was very much interested and wanted to join. Jinhyuk praised her spirit and walked closer, asking what she could offer the company in the future. She quickly replied that her unique ability was friendliness, something she believed would be helpful in company operations. Jinhyuk looked at her and realized she had already given up. He stepped even closer, but instead said he was disappointed. Still, he announced her as the first intern candidate for the Goen Company. Hana nervously asked for time to think. Jinhyuk smiled like Satan's middle manager as she panicked and suddenly offered him Braham's ring. Crying, she clutched his leg, saying her brother had traded the ring to the Chinese side in exchange for Korean ginseng. She begged him to spare her. Jinhyuk wondered if Braham's ring had ended up with the Crow Guild. It was one of the best items on the first floor, boosting movement speed, granting mana resistance, and suppressing a monster's mana. 3 powerful effects in one. He activated Truth Eye, and the system confirmed her words were true. He then placed a hand on her shoulder and congratulated her on becoming a Goen Company intern. Hana finally let out a shaky sigh of relief. But Jinhyuk, ever the CEO of suffering more than Goen Company, reminded her that they didn't pay interns but owned her soul. No matter the time or place, even at 3 a.m. or in Jeju Island, she had to show up when called. He told her the most important part was writing the contract. Hana looked confused. Jinhyuk opened the system, and it read the world's memories. He activated Commune and the fire element. The system declared the two skills had fused. A powerful mana flared in his palm. Jin-hyuk, with a dark smile, told her it might feel a little hot. The system announced he had obtained the stigma of soul. Hana was puzzled by the strange contract method. Jin-hyuk grinned, stepping closer, mana-covered fist inches from her face, saying if she thought we were signing a paper. She screamed, as one does when they realize their new job comes with face branding and eternal suffering clauses. But Jin-hyuk welcomed her as the company's intern. The system confirmed it. The stigma of soul had been engraved onto Hana's face. It stated that the engraved target must obey the caster's orders. Any action that harms the caster would result in unbearable pain throughout the body. After 30 days of eating dirt and dodging death, they finally escaped the hellhole known as the first-floor labyrinth. The system notified that for the first time, someone had successfully cleared the first-floor labyrinth. Hana was ready to cry tears of joy, not because she found hope, but because she was still alive and didn't have to eat moss stew again. Then came the real gift. 5,000 coins would be awarded to each player. She cheered up, but before she could celebrate, Jin-hyuk called out and told her to hand over the coins. Her face dropped in disappointment. Jin-hyuk casually opened his system menu, sitting on over 10,000 coins like some greedy loot guy. At this point, Bro wasn't a player, he was the dungeon's tax collector. He then ordered Hana to bring him Braham's ring in 3 days. When she tried to make an excuse, Jin-hyuk gathered mana in his fist in rage and cut her time down to 2 days. One mana slap later, she stood there shaking, red mark on her face, agreeing to somehow get it. Meanwhile, on a giant screen in the city, news was broadcasting. A man was reporting that a week from now, Korea's top guild, Dagon, would be moving to attack the third-floor boss monster. He said Korea's expectations were high, especially as the US and Japan were struggling. Jin-hyuk stood at a distance, watching the screen while Hana stood beside him. The discussion on screen continued, questioning whether they should wait for other nations or find their breakthrough. They claimed Dagon Guild was more than capable of handling it. Jin-hyuk quietly thought to himself that aiming for the third-floor boss within a month would lead to regrets. They were rushing to seize tower resources, but each floor had a 90-day time limit. There was no need to skip ahead to the second or third floors yet. The basics were weak, and the higher they went, the more intense the pressure would become. There was no do-over in the fall of mankind. Back in his apartment, Jin-hyuk thought about collecting information on what had happened during the month he was stuck inside. To get good intel in a world full of noise and misinformation, he knew he needed reliable sources, people he'd known for a long time. Later, sitting at a cafe, he met up with 2 familiar faces from the past. A guy introducing himself as Taemin, and a girl named Yeonwa, known for her nuclear fists. Jin-hyuk was a bit surprised. Not everyone in the tower looked like they did in the game 2 years ago. These were old players he had known from the Tower of Trials, and he never thought their first real-life meeting would happen like this. Activating his Eyes of Truth, the system showed Taemin's status panel. His unique ability was the Machine Monarch title, just as Jin-hyuk expected. Other than its high mana consumption, there was nothing to complain about. It was a unique skill built for large-scale combat. Then he looked at Yeonwa's panel and guessed her ability suited melee combat. Seeing that their levels were close, he figured they must have hunted together before. The system also showed copy conditions. Since they had been long-time comrades, once the 3 reached the 20th floor together, Jin-hyuk could copy Taemin's ability. Taemin snapped Jin-hyuk out of his mental loading screen, asking for his intro. Jin-hyuk told him his name, trying to sound cool, but then Taemin casually dropped his cringe gamer nickname. Bro instantly regretted the username he cooked up 11 years ago. Still, as they kept talking, he realized both of them had the rarest trait in existence, social skills. They weren't fake, clout-chasing NPCs, just 2 chill guys who didn't make him feel like a walking vending machine for buffs. For the first time, he could breathe without expecting someone to backstab him. That's why he wanted to learn from them, about what had been happening outside the labyrinth, guild movements around the world, trends among broadcast streamers, and even about a group called Mine that kidnapped people and forced them into illegal coin farming. Later in a taxi, Taemin asked Jin-hyuk if he had even gotten tested, since he said he wasn't around for a month. Jin-hyuk looked confused. Taemin explained that after the Tower of Trials appeared, players had started pouring in like crazy, but from the 2nd floor onward, death rates spiked. The Korean Awakening Association barred anyone from moving up unless they passed a test. Yeonwa showed a barcode stamped on her wrist, explaining that's how they received authentication. Jin-hyuk recalled the name Jongsu, chairman of the Awakening Association. With a convincing excuse of reducing casualties, the man had found a way to scout hidden talents. Smirking slightly, Jin-hyuk decided that he'd turn the association's strict system into a tool for himself. At the entrance of a large building, the symbol of the association stood tall. After its establishment, players below grade F were disqualified from reaching the second floor. On the other hand, anyone graded higher instantly received attention from top guilds and government agencies. Three types of people gathered at the testing site: those desperate to climb the tower, reporters covering the chaos, and the ones who wanted to make their name known. Among the crowd, a journalist noticed someone familiar. Cameras flashed as people whispered that it was Hana from the Black Crow Guild. She had survived the labyrinth alongside her brother Hajin, a rising star. Behind them stood a massive man, Kitty from the Fighting Abbey Guild. Kitty looked around in disgust, muttering that they were testing anyone now. Hajin said it was only natural since people were dreaming of quick riches. Kitty replied that he had no time to waste, blaming Hajin and Hana for dragging him there. With his eyes glowing in fury, he warned them not to screw up. Hana nervously promised they wouldn't, and Hajin agreed with Kitty's frustration. Security guards began clearing the way for celebrities. Jin-hyuk, standing in the crowd with Taemin and Yeonwoo, was asked by a guard to move. Jin-hyuk looked confused, saying he was simply waiting for his turn. Hajin stepped in and said he'd take care of Jin-hyuk, then walked up and pushed him. Jin-hyuk told him he was making a mistake and should back off. Recognizing Hajin, Jin-hyuk remembered Hana mentioning him as the guild head. Activating his eyes of truth, he checked Hajin's status panel. His unique ability was Fatal Dark Attack. The system displayed the copy condition. Jin-hyuk needed to reach maximum friendship to copy it, and he smirked to himself at the thought that maximum hostility might work just as well. As Hana saw her brother clashing with Jin-hyuk, she began to panic. She noticed the creepy grin forming on Jin-hyuk's face as Hajin insulted him. Without a word, Jin-hyuk grabbed Hajin's raised finger and crushed it, the scream echoing loudly through the entire area. Hajin's finger was now broken, and he cursed at Jin-hyuk, who calmly drank water from a bottle. The crowd around them was stunned. Enraged, Hajin charged at Jin-hyuk, mana swirling around his fist. Everyone around gasped in shock. Jin-hyuk sensed something was off and looked directly at his opponent. Just then, he grabbed the open water bottle and splashed its contents into Hajin's face. Hajin swung a powerful slash, but Jin-hyuk was no longer in front of him. In the blink of an eye, Hajin received a sharp blow to his leg, his stance collapsed, and he crashed to the floor clutching his knee. Jin-hyuk stood calmly nearby. People around were in shock, still trying to process what had just happened. Hana, trembling with fear, wondered why Jin-hyuk had shown up here too. Kitty stepped in, suggesting they stop it there. Jin-hyuk activated his Eye of Truth but was met with a system warning. The skill was cancelled due to the level gap being too wide. Jin-hyuk guessed that Kitty was over level 20. Facing him, Jin-hyuk remarked that he hadn't realized Hajin brought his nanny with him. Kitty replied that Hajin could be a handful, but he was useful in some ways. Jin-hyuk, now curious, asked if that usefulness came from supplying Korean ginseng to China. That comment hit a nerve. Kitty snapped, demanding to know how Jin-hyuk found out. The crowd and journalists overheard the exchange. Jin-hyuk, pushing further, said the real question was about handling the side effects of the ginseng. Kitty, unable to hold back, shouted for him to stop. The system notified Jin-hyuk that Kitty had activated the blackout barrier, and a wall formed around them. Taemin tried to break through while Yeonwoo shouted from outside, both concerned for Jin-hyuk. Inside the barrier, Kitty confronted Jin-hyuk and asked if he wanted to exchange the information for 10 of their monopolized dungeons. Korean ginseng was known for restoring stamina and mana, but eating it raw caused mana poisoning. Jin-hyuk calmly explained that the side effect could be neutralized using 3 specific items: Karasian's extract, Moonlight Stone, and especially the Mandragora root. He noted that Kitty must be struggling to find the root. Then he asked if Kitty trusted him. Kitty, thinking it over, realized the information matched what the guild's researchers and explorers had found. He was still wary of Jin-hyuk's confidence. When Kitty gave a vague answer, holding a dagger to Jin-hyuk's face as a warning, he mentally acknowledged that the price Jin-hyuk asked, 10 dungeons, was too steep. He needed to set boundaries. But Jin-hyuk only smiled creepily and said he had it all backward. Jin-hyuk was the one offering the opportunity, not begging for it. He pulled out his dagger, energy swirling around it. Just then, a guard broke through the floor. Outside, Taemin and Yeonwoo were fighting. The system finally notified that the blackout barrier had been lifted. Jin-hyuk stepped out as the two rushed to him, asking if he was okay. Jin-hyuk casually said Kitty was more reasonable than expected. Hajin, seething, yelled that they should go after Jin-hyuk. Kitty shut him up by lifting him off the ground by the throat. He warned Hajin that Jin-hyuk wasn't someone he could deal with. If Hajin acted out again, he'd regret it. With his face turning red, Hajin quickly backed down. Kitty threw him to the floor and walked away. Hajin, still stunned, couldn't believe what had happened behind the barrier. His eyes burned red with humiliation and rage. The system then notified that Jin-hyuk had met the copy condition. Since his hostility with Hajin had reached the maximum, he had successfully copied the skill of shallow breathing. The skill allowed control over breathing and heart rate. The system confirmed that the copied skill was now stored in the memory of the world. Jin-hyuk walked ahead, smiling to himself while murmuring. Then he thought it was time to take the test. Looking at the leaderboard screen, he saw Hana ranked first and wondered if she had eaten some ginseng before taking the test. Soon, his name was called. Inside the testing room, a crystal floated in front of him. One of the staff explained that the test was simple: strike the magic stone using any weapon or exclusive ability. The purpose was to measure his potential. As Jin-hyuk approached the crystal, holding his dagger, one of the staff asked if he wasn't planning to use his unique ability. Jin-hyuk replied that his weapon was enough. He was pointed to a low-grade stone, but he stood before a mid-grade one. The staff tried to redirect him, explaining that mid- and high-grade stones didn't even react to regular people. But before he could finish, Jin-hyuk released red energy that filled the room. The dagger in his hand hummed with power. The system notified that the stat rift had been activated at its max. Jin-hyuk smirked, thinking it was time to see whether his suffering in the labyrinth paid off. His eyes glowed red as he slashed. The staff watched in disbelief. Most candidates failed to meet the magic power minimum, but here was someone who sliced a magic stone clean in half. He was instantly declared S-rank. The tester said he would report this to the higher-ups, but Jin-hyuk stopped him, asking him to delay it by 1 week. The man was stunned, but Jin-hyuk's deadly gaze and aura convinced him. Jin-hyuk said it was for personal reasons and didn't care what they did after a week. He added that one thing he'd learned in life was how the close threat was always scarier than any law far away. Terrified, the man agreed. Later, Hana came to meet Jin-hyuk. She showed him Braham's ring and proudly said she completed the task. Jin-hyuk took the ring, saying he knew she could do it, and added that they would reunite sooner than he thought. Hana demanded he remove the contract mark on her face. Jin-hyuk, waving her off, said he'd decide based on her future actions. Sometime after, Taemin and Yeonwoo were shocked when Jin-hyuk told them he was ranked if he said he would take the test again next week. Yeonwoo reminded him to go to a dungeon for the second trial. Sitting in a taxi, Jin-hyuk said he'd find one soon and told them to keep climbing the tower. While riding, he reflected that the first test was about measuring magical power, but the second one required clearing a dungeon. Most people picked ones filled with goblins or rocks due to low difficulty, but not him. He was heading to the only ruins that existed on the first floor. Even back when the Tower of Trials was just a game, no one had cleared them. Not then and not now. He imagined a demonic woman waiting inside. It had been a while since he came here. Now, standing before the dungeon with a large backpack and a grin, he recalled the name, the Hall of the Depraved. From behind, someone called out and told him to take off his luggage. Will Jin-hyuk continue bending the tower to his will, or will the game turn into a nightmare even he can't outplay? For the next part, comment powerful player and like the video, and subscribe channel for more interesting videos.